Hello everyone! We're back with more fads and trends from the 1980s. If you were there, you might remember these or even participated in some. If this was before your time, these might seem interesting or cool or maybe even a little weird. As the saying goes, you had to be there. These were trendy within the context of their era, and like all fads, their popularity decreased over time. Some of these were from the fashion world, some were technology-based, and some were product and design trends. So put on your parachute pants and fingerless gloves, and get in the mood for a retro look back at some of the fads and trends from the awesome 1980s. Sweatbands. This fad was probably originated from the aerobics trend that took the world by storm in the early 1980s, or maybe even from the popular Japanese samurai craze that was also so pervasive at the time. Athletes definitely wore these during workouts or sporting events, like tennis. But then they became popular fashion accessories outside of athletic settings, and lots of people started wearing them. Sweatbands and headbands became interchangeable as an 80s style feature, and began showing up in music videos with singers and bands wearing these fashionable noggin wraps. Decades and styles come and go, and this fashion trend got left behind in the 1980s. The Keytar. When the 1980s got underway, there was a flourish of new technology available, all thanks to advances in semiconductor and the miniaturization of electronics. Suddenly the 1980s were the future, and with synth-pop and new wave bands emerging like Duran Duran, OMD, and Depeche Mode. Prominent in onstage gear was the Keytar, a lightweight synthesizer that was supported by a strap slung around the neck and shoulders, like a guitar. The instrument was a controller that was used to trigger notes and control pitch bends and other rudimentary synthesizer functions. It allowed a musician to move around on stage, as opposed to stationary positioning required by a conventional keyboard array. Keytars also conveyed a sense of technology that a lot of bands chose to project as a key component of their image. Wearing sunglasses indoors. I blame this one on Corey Hart. Who dat, you wonder? Corey Hart is a Canadian singer-songwriter-producer guy who had a monster top 40 hit and video in 1983 titled Sunglasses at Night. The video showed him wearing his sunglasses at night while he was singing about hiding his pain, or shame, or something. There was stuff about switchblades in there too. Anyway, it seemed like after that people started wearing sunglasses indoors as a fashion statement, or to be hip like Corey, or Jim McMahon here. We don't see that much anymore, unless you live in a small country where your leader is a dictator. Baby on board signs. This one lasted well into the 90s, but got its start in the 1980s. These were the omnipresent window placards that you would see in rear car windows all over the streets and highways of the US and throughout the world. The fad caught on and flourished in the mid-1980s, but then quickly began fading shortly thereafter. Parody imitation placards began appearing with slogans like, "Baby carries no cash," "Baby I'm bored," and "Baby is driving." After a while, the parody signs significantly outnumbered the actual "Baby on board" sign. Who could forget the ultimate parody and extremely hummable tune that appeared in a 1993 Simpsons episode, where Homer and his buds form a barbershop quartet named the B Sharps, with one of their songs titled "Baby on Board." It was inspired by the time when Marge bought a "Baby on Board" sign hoping it would stop people from intentionally ramming their car. Swatch Watches. Swatch Watches were conceived by a Swiss watchmaking company as a competitive response to Japanese digital watches that had taken the market by storm in the later 1970s and early 1980s. The analog watches were designed to be a fashionable, low-cost alternative to the somewhat expensive digital watches, where a customer could purchase multiple watches in different styles to accessorize whatever clothing style that they might be wearing that day. The name Swatch was thought to be a mashup of the words Swiss and watch, or possibly of the words second, watch, as the watches were intended to be casual, disposable, fast fashion accessories. During the 1980s and early 1990s, there were over 500 different designs of swatches. Some customers even chose to wear several styles all at once, with multiple swatches worn at the same time. You can still buy swatches today in updated styles and colors. Cabbage Patch Kids. These things were the most popular must-have Christmas gifts in the early 1980s, with fights occasionally breaking out between parents over these hard-to-find dolls. They were also one of the most popular toy fads of the early 1980s and appeared in board games, record albums, animated cartoons, and also a clothing line. Why were they so popular? Because they were adorable with their soft sculptured cartoonish features, hair material made of yarn, and plush doll bodies adorned in cute baby clothes fashions. Some clever marketing whimsy was also employed where the doll was adopted instead of simply purchased. Of course, one had to pay an adoption fee for the privilege. By the end of 1984, the Cabbage Patch Kids branded product line sold nearly $2 billion worth of merchandise. Over the years, a number of different brand licensees and manufacturers have produced the Cabbage Patch Kids dolls and variants along with related products that continue to be sold to this day. Val-Speak. The term Val-Speak described a type of slang that became popular in the 80s that combined 1960s surfer slang, hippie lingo, and skateboard jargon. It originated in Southern California's San Fernando Valley and gained national attention in 1982 when Frank Zappa and his daughter Moon Unit came out with the song Valley Girl that poked fun at the fad. It popularized the now common use of the word like as a conversational filler, much to the annoyance of mostly every grown-up who ever had to listen to it. Other phrases that we still hear today are, there's like totally a lot more Val-Speak slang which for sure I'm sure you've heard of and might even use on occasion yourself. Like, whatever. Miami Vice fashion. Miami Vice was a crime drama TV show that ran on NBC for 5 seasons in the mid to late 1980s. It was known for its groundbreaking visuals and style that heavily incorporated elements of the 1980s new wave culture and became noted for its inclusion of contemporary pop and rock music, stylized visuals, and cutting-edge fashion and decor, and was summarized at the time as MTV Cops. For set design, the show relied heavily on Art Deco design influences and pastel colors. The clothing worn on Miami Vice had a significant influence on men's fashion, and popularized the rolled sleeve Armani jacket and t-shirt together with slip-on loafers look. The show even contracted with major designers such as Hugo Boss and Versace to serve as fashion consultants and set a standard for the stereotypical image of 1980s fashion and culture. The show went away in 1990, and its influence on fashion faded away along with it. Hair metal bands. Hair metal rock bands, also known as glam metal, were a subgenre of heavy metal music that focused on theatrical visuals along with pop-influenced guitar riffs and hooks. Early progenitors of the trend included David Bowie, the New York Dolls, T-Rex, Kiss, and Alice Cooper. In the early 1980s, hair metal started to gain traction, originating in the Sunset Strip area of Los Angeles. Bands like Motley Crue, Poison, Quiet Riot, and Rat found themselves selling millions of records and headlining major world concert tours. But as the decade wound down, so too did the popularity of these bands, until a new stripped-down, glamourless music style took over in the 1990s. Most of the hair metal bands from the 80s are still around today, but not as mainstream as they were 40 years ago. However, in the early 2000s, a band emerged in the Los Angeles area that adopted the look, style, and imagery of the 1980s hair metal bands as a parody. These guys call themselves Steel Panther and have only gotten more popular as the years have gone by. California Raisins ad campaign. This was an immensely popular ad campaign that appeared on television and on products in the 1980s. The California Raisins were a fictional R&B animated musical group created as advertising and merchandising characters. The animation was created using a stop-motion claymation technique, and their music was comprised mostly of popular R&B cover songs. The original commercial that appeared nationwide in 1986 featured the Raisins singing Marvin Gaye's "Heard It Through the Grapevine," and proved to be wildly popular and led to appearances on TV shows, cartoons, and releases of studio record albums, as well as extensive merchandising sales. Although the California Raisins are still around, their popularity has dwindled in the decades since they first charmed us, way back when. And that caps off this review of hugely popular fads from the 1980s that seemed to be everywhere for a short while, and then went away when something new came along to replace them. Which of these do you remember? Let us know what your thoughts and experiences are relating to these in the comments below. And check back on this channel for upcoming interesting and entertaining videos about retro pop culture fads,